hidden beneath the waves are the ghosts of war. From the battleships to the submarines, these wrecks tell haunting stories of ambition and tragedy. But what's left of them today? In this video, we'll uncover 12 extraordinary wrecks scattered across the globe, each with its own fascinating story. From the devastating loss of the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor, to the mysterious sinking of Soviet sub K-129 and the secret CIA mission to salvage the wreck. We'll explore their history, the events that led to their sinking, and the haunting wrecks that divers and historians still marvel at to this day. Welcome to Shipwreck History. The USS Arizona is one of the most iconic and tragic symbols of American naval history. Commissioned in 1916, she was a Pennsylvania-class battleship designed to project power during the era of steel dreadnoughts. At over 600 feet long, with a top speed of 21 knots, the USS Arizona was equipped with 12 14-inch guns, making her a formidable force in the U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet. Her early years were spent in routine operations, including training exercises and ceremonial duties. By the early 1940s, the Arizona was stationed at Pearl Harbor, a vital strategic base in the Pacific. But her place in history was sealed on the morning of December 7, 1941, when Japanese aircraft launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The Arizona was hit by several bombs during the assault, but the most devastating was an armor-piercing bomb that struck her forward magazines. The explosion was cataclysmic, tearing the battleship apart and killing 1,177 of her crew, nearly half of the total casualties at Pearl Harbor that day. Within minutes, the Arizona sank to the harbor floor, her burning wreckage marking the dawn of America's entry into World War II. Efforts to salvage the ship began almost immediately, but the extent of the damage made a full recovery impossible. Instead, the decision was made to leave the Arizona, where she lay, a lasting memorial to those who lost their lives. Over the decades, she has become a powerful symbol of sacrifice, visited by millions of people each year at the USS Arizona Memorial, built above the wreck in 1962. Beneath the surface, the Arizona's remains are hauntingly preserved. Her hull rests in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor, with oil still seeping from her tanks. Divers and researchers continue to study the wreck, which offers insights into both the ship's final moments and the corrosive effects of time. Today, the USS Arizona is not just a sunken battleship. It's a time capsule, a graveyard, and a poignant reminder of the cost of war. Her story continues to resonate, ensuring that the memory of those lost won't be forgotten. The Bismarck, named for Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, was the pride of the German Kriegsmarine and one of the most feared battleships of World War II. First launched in February 1939, this massive warship measured over 820 feet long, with a displacement of 50,000 tons when fully loaded. Armed with 8 15-inch guns, she was a floating fortress, capable of engaging any ship in battle. Her speed and firepower made her a formidable symbol of Germany's naval ambition. In May 1941, the Bismarck embarked on her first and only combat mission, Operation Rheinebing. Alongside the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, the Bismarck's objective was to break out into the North Atlantic and disrupt convoys supplying Great Britain. On May 24th, she engaged British warships in the Denmark Strait. In this fateful battle, the Bismarck dealt a devastating blow to the British Navy by sinking the battlecruiser HMS Hood, one of Britain's most iconic ships, with a single catastrophic hit. Only 3 of the HMS Hood's crew of over 1,400 survived. The Bismarck also damaged the HMS Prince of Wales, forcing it to retreat. The Bismarck herself did not escape unscathed. Her rudder was damaged, affecting her maneuverability and forcing her to alter plans and head for repairs in occupied France. The Royal Navy, outraged by the loss of the Hood, launched an all-out pursuit of the Bismarck. On the morning of May 27th, British warships, including the battleships HMS King George V and HMS Rodney, closed in. After about 100 minutes of fighting, the Bismarck was sunk by the combined effects of shellfire, torpedo hits, and deliberate scuttling by her crew. The Bismarck sank on May 27, 1941, resulting in the loss of over 2,000 crew members. Only 114 survived. The wreck of the Bismarck was discovered in June 1989 by Dr. Robert Ballard, the same oceanographer who found the Titanic. Resting at a depth of 15,719 feet in the Atlantic, the wreck remains astonishingly well preserved, a testament to the durability of its design. The ship lies upright on the seabed, with her superstructure heavily damaged from the intense bombardment she endured. Today, the Bismarck is a powerful reminder of the immense destruction during World War II. Her story, from her majestic beginnings to her tragic end, continues to captivate historians and naval enthusiasts alike. The K-129 was a Soviet ballistic missile submarine launched in 1959 during the height of the Cold War. As a diesel-electric powered sub, it was designed to carry 3 nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles, making it a key asset in the Soviet Union's strategic deterrence forces. Its role was clear: patrol the Pacific, stay undetected, and if necessary, launch its missiles against adversaries. As tensions between the US and the Soviets escalated in the 1960s, submarines like the K-129 became a cornerstone of nuclear strategy, operating silently in the depths of the world's oceans. In March 1968, the K-129 embarked on a routine patrol mission from its base in Kamchatka. But somewhere in the vast North Pacific, communication was abruptly lost. When the submarine failed to report back, the Soviet Navy launched an extensive search, scouring thousands of miles of open ocean. Despite deploying a large fleet of ships and aircraft, the Soviets couldn't locate the missing submarine, and the crew of 98 was presumed lost. Unbeknownst to the Soviets, U.S. underwater surveillance networks detected an acoustic anomaly consistent with an underwater explosion. Using this data, the U.S. Navy identified a potential location for the wreck and dispatched the advanced submarine USS Halibut to investigate. Operating under extreme secrecy, the Halibut used deep-sea cameras and remote equipment to confirm the wreck's location, over 3 miles below the ocean's surface, approximately 1,560 miles northwest of Hawaii. The discovery of the sub set the stage for one of the most ambitious and secretive Cold War operations, Project Azorian. Spearheaded by the CIA, this covert mission aimed to recover the submarine and its valuable contents, including cryptographic materials and potential nuclear warheads. The CIA commissioned the construction of the Hughes-Glomar Explorer, using Howard Hughes's name and the cover story of a deep-sea mining operation to conceal the vessel's true purpose. In 1974, the Glomar Explorer reached the wreck site and attempted to lift the sub from its extreme depth of over 16,000 feet. The operation was partially successful, raising a portion of the submarine, which included nuclear-tipped torpedoes and the remains of 6 Soviet sailors. These sailors were given a formal burial at sea, with full military honors, a gesture the U.S. recorded and reportedly shared with Soviet officials years later. Much of the sub remained on the ocean floor, and questions about its mission and cause of sinking lingered. Theories about its loss range from mechanical failure to a possible collision with a U.S. submarine, though no conclusive evidence has surfaced. The K-129 story remains one of the Cold War's most enigmatic tales, blending espionage, advanced technology, and the ever-present shadow of nuclear conflict. When the HMS Coventry left the shipyard in 1974, she represented the pinnacle of modern naval engineering in the Cold War era. As a guided missile destroyer, the Coventry was designed to protect fleet operations from air attacks with her cutting-edge radar systems and Sea Dart surface-to-air missiles. At 410 feet in length and capable of speeds exceeding 30 knots, she was a powerful addition to the Royal Navy's fleet, symbolizing Britain's commitment to defending its interest on the global stage. HMS Coventry was primarily involved in training exercises and patrolling before her deployment in the Falklands War in 1982. And that's where her story took a tragic turn. During the war, she played a pivotal role in Britain's campaign to reclaim the islands from Argentine occupation. Deployed to the South Atlantic, the the Coventry was tasked with providing air defense for British ships and supporting ground troops. Early in the conflict, her advanced missile systems intercepted multiple enemy aircraft, demonstrating the crucial value of her capabilities. Alongside HMS Broadsword, the Coventry was a cornerstone of British naval operations in the region, taking on dangerous missions to ensure the fleet's safety. However, the stakes escalated as the conflict reached its peak. On May 25, 1982, Coventry and Broadsword were stationed northwest of the Falklands, acting as a decoy to lure Argentine aircraft away from other British ships. The strategy was high risk, and that afternoon, it faced a severe test. Argentine Skyhawk jets launched a coordinated attack, targeting the two ships. In the chaos of battle, the Coventry's missile system struggled to lock onto the fast-moving aircraft. 3 1,000-pound bombs struck the Coventry in quick succession. 2 of them detonated, tearing through her hull, igniting fires and causing catastrophic flooding. Within 20 minutes, the once proud destroyer capsized and sank. The crew's evacuation was swift, but 19 sailors were tragically lost in the attack. The wreck of the HMS Coventry lies upside down in approximately 300 feet of water off Pebble Island in the South Atlantic. Discovered later in 1982, the site has been explored by both divers and remotely operated vehicles, and is a monument to the sacrifices made during the Falklands War. The wreck is now classified as a controlled site under the Protection of Military Remains Act. Though her service lasted less than a decade, the Coventry story continues to live on as an example of courage, strategy, and the heavy cost of conflict. The HMAS Sydney, a light cruiser of the Royal Australian Navy, began her distinguished career in 1935. Built in England and named after the Australian city, the Sydney was armed with 8 6-inch guns and boasted a top speed of over 30 knots. During the early years of World War II, she became a source of national pride, achieving significant victories in the Mediterranean. Her most famous triumph came in July 1940, when she sank an Italian cruiser in a high-stakes naval battle near Crete. The victory established the Sydney as one of the most celebrated ships in the Australian fleet. However, Sydney's legendary status would take a tragic turn in November 1941. Returning from convoy escort duty in Southeast Asia, she encountered the German auxiliary cruiser Cormoran off the coast of Western Australia. The Cormoran, disguised as a Dutch merchant vessel, caught the Sydney off guard. When the Sydney closed in to identify the ship, Cormoran revealed her hidden guns and opened fire. Despite being heavily armed, the Sydney was unable to respond effectively as Cormoran's opening salvo disabled her bridge and key systems. A fierce and chaotic battle followed, leaving both ships critically damaged. Sydney suffered catastrophic hits to her magazines and engine room, leading to a massive explosion and uncontrollable fires. She drifted out of sight, and all 645 crew members were lost, making it the largest loss of life in Australian naval history. The Cormoran fared no better. Her crew scuttled the damaged ship, though most of her sailors survived and were later captured by Australian forces. For decades, the disappearance of HMAS Sydney was shrouded in mystery, sparking intense speculation and controversy. Some questioned how a warship of her caliber could fall to a disguised raider, while others debated the exact location of her sinking. The mystery was finally solved in March 2008, when the wrecks of both Sydney and Cormoran were discovered 12 miles apart, off the coast of Western Australia. The Sydney rests upright at a depth of over 8,000 feet, her hull heavily damaged, but with parts intact. The discovery confirmed the accounts of Cormoran's survivors and brought closure to decades of speculation. Today, the wreck is both a war grave and a symbol of sacrifice, honoring the lives of those lost in one of Australia's greatest wartime tragedies. The HMCS Athabascan, known as the Unlucky Lady, was a destroyer of the Royal Canadian Navy during World War II. Launched in 1941, she was designed for speed, versatility, and durability, equipped to hunt submarines, engage enemy ships, and provide critical naval support. The Athabascan was part of the Tribal-class fleet that represented the pinnacle of destroyer technology, boasting powerful armament and advanced radar systems. Despite her strengths, her service was plagued by misfortunes, including repeated mechanical issues and combat losses, which earned her an infamous reputation among the crews. On April 29, 1944, the Athabascan was tasked with patrolling the English Channel alongside her sister ship, HMCS Haida. The mission was to intercept German Elbling-class destroyers, which had been conducting aggressive operations. The Canadian destroyers spotted the German vessels, T-24 and T-27, just off the coast of Brittany, France. A fierce engagement ensued, with the Haida managing to disable the T-27, forcing it to run aground. However, as the Athabascan maneuvered to engage, she was struck by a torpedo launched by the T-24. The torpedo impact caused a catastrophic explosion, igniting fires that spread rapidly through the ship. The blast also crippled her propulsion, leaving the Athabascan dead in the water and vulnerable to further attack. As the flames intensified, the order was given to abandon ship. Tragically, the chaos of the sinking, combined with the frigid waters and ongoing enemy fire, claimed the lives of 128 crew members. Despite the danger, the Haida risked further engagement to rescue survivors from the icy waters. An additional 83 sailors were captured by German forces and spent the remainder of the war in POW camps. The sinking of the Athabascan remained a point of deep national significance in Canada, as it marked the largest loss of life aboard a single Royal Canadian Navy ship during World War II. For decades, the location of her wreck was a mystery, despite extensive efforts to locate her final resting place. In 2002, an expedition successfully discovered her remains scattered across the seabed near the island of Bats. The wreck is lying in approximately 300 feet of water and revealed the devastating impact of the torpedo strike, with much of the ship's structure heavily fragmented. Memorials in Canada and France honor those who were lost and those who survived under extraordinary circumstances, ensuring that the story of the unlucky lady endures as part of Canada's proud naval history. The USS Indianapolis was a Portland-class heavy cruiser commissioned in 1932. During the Second World War, the ship played a vital role in numerous Pacific operations, including providing critical support during the invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. But its most secretive mission came in July 1945, when it delivered components for an atomic bomb to Tinian Island. A mission so classified that even the ship's crew didn't fully know its importance. On July 30, 1945, just days after completing this delivery, tragedy struck. While en route to the Philippines, the Indianapolis was torpedoed by the Japanese submarine I-58. Multiple torpedoes struck the ship, causing catastrophic damage. The USS Indianapolis sank quickly, in approximately 12 minutes. Of the 1,200 crew members aboard, about 800 survived the initial sinking and were left adrift in the ocean. Over the next several days, exposure, dehydration, and shark attacks reduced the number of survivors to just 316. The U.S. Navy didn't know about the sinking of the USS Indianapolis for over 3 days, because of communication errors, wartime complacency, and a directive that limited radio traffic. Desperation and fear grew, as crewmen awaited rescue in shark-infested waters. The rescue came by chance when a Navy patrol plane spotted survivors and pulled them to safety. The sinking of the Indianapolis is the greatest single loss of life in U.S. Navy history from a single ship. Captain of the Indianapolis, Charles McVeigh, was court-martialed and convicted for hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag, though he was later cleared. There is some evidence to suggest the Navy bore some responsibility for putting the ship in harm's way. The ship's story didn't end there. For decades, the exact location of the wreck remained a mystery, shrouded in speculation and myths. Finally, in 2017, a team led by billionaire philanthropist Paul Allen discovered the Indianapolis at a depth of over 18,000 feet in the Philippine Sea. The wreck is well preserved, with its hull and key features still visible, offering a reminder of its tragic final moments. Today, the Indianapolis stands as a symbol of both the sacrifices of war and the resilience of its survivors, ensuring its legacy continues on. The USS Scorpion, a skipjack-class nuclear-powered attack submarine, was commissioned in 1960 as part of the U.S. Navy's Cold War fleet. Designed for speed and agility, the Scorpion was equipped to track and engage Soviet vessels, making it a critical player in the tense underwater chess match of the era. During its years of service, she participated in training exercises and intelligence-gathering missions, often shadowing Soviet naval activity. However, its service ended in tragedy, leaving behind one of the most enduring mysteries in naval history. In May 1968, the Scorpion was returning to its home port in Norfolk, Virginia, after a 3-month deployment in the Mediterranean, which included monitoring Soviet naval maneuvers near the Canary Islands. While en route, the submarine suddenly went silent, and after failing to return to Norfolk, it was officially declared missing. In the months following the USS Scorpion's disappearance, the U.S. Navy launched an extensive search operation, combing the Atlantic with ships, submarines, and aircraft. The initial search yielded no clues, deepening the mystery surrounding its fate. It wasn't until October 1968, 5 months after its last communication, that the wreck was finally located 400 miles southwest of the Azores at a depth of over 10,000 feet. The hull was found broken into several sections, with the forward part of the submarine heavily damaged. The cause of the Scorpion's sinking remains uncertain to this day. Various theories have emerged over the years, ranging from a catastrophic torpedo malfunction to an internal explosion. Some experts suggest that mechanical failure or structural fatigue could have played a role, while others speculate that Soviet interference might have been involved during the height of Cold War tensions. Despite multiple investigations, the Navy has never officially confirmed a definitive cause. The wreck of the USS Scorpion remains one of the deepest military shipwrecks ever discovered. The site, sitting in the vast abyss of the Atlantic, is treated as a war grave, with its exact location kept confidential to deter unauthorized exploration. Photos of the wreck reveal haunting scenes of the once mighty vessel, now corroded and consumed by the deep ocean environment. Today, the loss of the Scorpion and its 99 crew members is remembered by their families and historians, and there are multiple memorials dedicated to them. The incident led to improvements in submarine safety and operational protocols, but for many, the unanswered questions surrounding the Scorpion's fate continue to cast a shadow over its legacy. The USS Saratoga was one of the first aircraft carriers built by the U.S. Navy when it was commissioned in 1927. Originally designed as a battlecruiser, it was converted into an aircraft carrier under the limitations of the Washington Naval Treaty. This massive ship, nearly 900 feet long, quickly became a cornerstone of naval aviation, serving as a testing ground for new carrier strategies and aircraft during the interwar years. During World War II, the Saratoga saw extensive action. She was part of the early Pacific campaigns, including the Battle of Wake Island and the Guadalcanal campaign. Despite being torpedoed twice during the war, the carrier always managed to return to service after repairs. One of her most notable moments came in 1944 when she became a training carrier, preparing aviators for the final phases of the war in the Pacific. After the war, the USS Saratoga was decommissioned, but her story wasn't over. With the advent of nuclear weapons, she was selected as a target ship for Operation Crossroads in 1946, a series of nuclear tests conducted at Bikini Atoll. The Saratoga was exposed to nuclear detonations, the second of which sank her on July 25. Her sinking marked the end of an era for one of the most storied ships in the U.S. Navy. The USS Saratoga lies upright on the lagoon floor at Bikini Atoll, approximately 50 feet below the surface. The wreck is considered one of the largest and most accessible diveable aircraft carriers in the world. While the area was previously contaminated due to nuclear testing, radiation levels have decreased over time, and the site has been deemed safe for diving under controlled conditions. The USS Saratoga's legacy is one of innovation, resilience, and sacrifice in the name of technological progress, making her one of the most iconic vessels in U.S. naval history. The USS Yorktown was one of the most celebrated aircraft carriers of World War II, playing a pivotal role in the Pacific. The USS Yorktown was commissioned in 1937 at Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia. She was equipped with state-of-the-art aviation facilities and carried a robust air group. The Yorktown's speed and firepower made her a key asset in the fight against Japanese forces. Her first major test came in the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942, where she helped halt Japan's advancement toward Australia. She was damaged during the battle, but her crew's determination ensured she could still fight. After rapid repairs at Pearl Harbor, completed in just 72 hours, she was thrust into action again at the decisive Battle of Midway in June 1942. At Midway, the Yorktown's aircraft were instrumental in sinking the Japanese carriers, Kaga and Soryu. However, the ship herself became a target. On June 4th, Japanese aircraft struck the Yorktown with devastating bombs and torpedoes, leaving her heavily damaged. Despite valiant efforts by her crew to keep her afloat, she was struck again days later by a Japanese submarine, which delivered the fatal blow. The Yorktown's sinking was a significant loss for the U.S. Navy, but her sacrifice helped secure an unparalleled victory at Midway, shifting the tide of the war in the Pacific. The wreck of the USS Yorktown was discovered in 1998 by famed oceanographer Robert Ballard, resting upright on the ocean floor at a depth of over 16,000 feet. The wreck offers a haunting glimpse into her storied past, with planes still visible on her flight deck. The Yorktown's legacy endures for the bravery of her crew and her critical role in turning the tide of World War II. Her story remains one of innovation, resilience, and sacrifice. The HMS Repulse and HMS Prince of Wales shared a fate in one of the most dramatic naval losses of World War II. Together, they formed Force Z, a British fleet sent to counter Japan's expansion in Southeast Asia. This was an ambitious show of strength, but it ultimately led to disaster. The HMS Repulse was a renowned class battlecruiser launched in 1916. She had a long service history, participating in both World Wars, and was well regarded for her speed and firepower. The HMS Prince of Wales was a brand new King George V class battleship. She was launched in 1939 and had already made a name for herself, taking part in the hunt for the Bismarck earlier in the war. On December 8, 1941, just after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, Force Z sailed from Singapore to intercept Japanese invasion convoys threatening Malaya. However, without air cover, the fleet faced a grave disadvantage. On December 10th, Japanese bombers and torpedo planes launched a relentless assault. Despite their anti-aircraft defenses, the Repulse and the Prince of Wales were overwhelmed. The Prince of Wales was hit by multiple torpedoes, disabling her rudder and power systems, while the Repulse succumbed to a series of bomb hits and torpedoes. Both ships sank within hours of each other, claiming over 800 lives. Their loss marked a turning point in naval warfare. The sinking of these capital ships by air power underscored the vulnerability of even the most advanced warships without proper air support. It also signaled the end of Britain's naval dominance in the region. The wrecks of the Repulse and Prince of Wales were discovered not long after their sinking, lying about 200 feet deep in the South China Sea. In the 2000s, more detailed surveys were conducted, offering more extensive documentation of their condition. Both ships are officially designated as war graves, with their remains protected under international law. Divers who have visited these sites report haunting views of the ships, with guns still pointing skyward, as if frozen in their final moments of battle. Today, the story of the HMS Repulse and HMS Prince of Wales reminds us how quickly naval warfare evolved during World War II, and the sacrifices of the sailors who fought to the end. History's most consequential shipwrecks lie scattered across the ocean floor. Monuments to human error, wartime tragedy, and nature's indifference. These vessels, once masterpieces of engineering, carrying thousands to their destinations, now rest in darkness, transformed into underwater memorials and artificial reefs. What draws us to these maritime disasters isn't merely their dramatic endings, but the contrast between their lives above water and their afterlives below. In this video, we'll explore 5 shipwrecks, examining both their active service and where they rest today. From passenger ferries claimed by navigation errors, to wartime vessels sunk by mines and torpedoes, these disasters show how quickly routine voyages can become maritime catastrophes, often at a devastating human cost. Built in France in 1964, the Salem Express served as a roll-on roll-off passenger ferry in the Red Sea region, operating during the early 1990s. At 115 meters long, the vessel traveled primarily between ports in Saudi Arabia and Egypt. On December 11, 1991, the Salem Express departed Jeddah, carrying hundreds of Egyptians returning from Mecca. Captain Morrow, who had commanded the ship since 1988, was familiar with the route, but faced deteriorating weather conditions as the vessel approached the Egyptian coast. Amid high winds and waves, Captain Morrow made a critical navigation error. Rather than following the standard route along the outer reefs, he attempted a shortcut closer to shore to reduce travel time. At approximately 11:13 p.m., on December 14th, sailing in darkness and heavy seas, the ship struck Hinman Reef at considerable speed. The collision breached the hull and crucially damaged the bow door mechanism. This design vulnerability allowed water to flood the car deck rapidly. The vessel destabilized within minutes, giving passengers little time to evacuate. Most were asleep in their cabins when the ship began listing heavily to starboard. It took less than 20 minutes after impact for the ship to go down. The Salem Express capsized and sank just hours before it would have reached its destination. Of approximately 650 people on board, only about 180 survived, though the exact passenger count and death toll remain disputed. Egyptian authorities reported 470 passengers lost, while other sources suggest it was over 800. Today, the Salem Express rests on its starboard side at a depth of about 30 meters. The wreck remains well preserved, with the bow door still open, visible evidence of its fatal flooding sequence. The vessel's accessibility makes it a frequent dive site, though its status as a mass grave creates ethical concerns. Marine growth now covers much of the exterior, with coral formations developing on the hull and superstructure. The wreck's interior is a somber time capsule. Personal belongings, suitcases, clothing, and everyday items remain scattered throughout passenger spaces, tangible reminders of the lives abruptly ended. Divers are restricted from entering passenger cabins, respecting the hundreds who were lost inside. The sudden sinking of the Salem Express left families with little warning or explanation. Many learn of the disaster through news reports rather than official channels. What was meant to be a joyful homecoming instead became one of Egypt's most devastating maritime tragedies. Few other wrecks in the Red Sea combine such well-preserved structural elements with such a clear and documented story of human error and its consequences. The SS Baron Gouch represented the golden age of Austro-Hungarian maritime power. Constructed at Scotland's Gourlay Brothers shipyard and launched in 1908, this elegant 85-meter passenger steamer primarily served the Dalmatian Express line, connecting Trieste with coastal destinations along the Adriatic. When World War I erupted in July 1914, the Austro-Hungarian Navy requisitioned the Baron Gouch for military transport duties. After completing several missions carrying troops to Kotor, the vessel returned to civilian service on August 11, 1914, a transition that would prove tragically brief. 2 days later, on August 13, the ship departed Kotor with approximately 300 passengers and crew. Prior to sailing, naval authorities briefed the ship's officers about defensive minefields, located in the northern Adriatic, to protect the naval base at Pula. Captains received explicit instructions to maintain specific routes to avoid these hazards. Around 3 p.m., as the Baron Gouch approached the Istrian Peninsula, the ship's first officer altered course. Despite warnings from a crewman who spotted mine-laying vessels in the distance, the ship proceeded directly into a freshly laid minefield. The misjudgment proved catastrophic. A tremendous explosion tore through the port side of the ship, followed shortly by a secondary blast when the boilers ruptured. The ship listed heavily to port and began sinking rapidly. Passengers rushed to the deck, but the vessel's increasing tilt made launching lifeboats nearly impossible. Just 7 minutes after the initial explosion, the Bering Gouge slipped beneath the Adriatic. The disaster claimed 127 lives, including numerous women and children. Rescue efforts by nearby vessels saved many survivors, though the exact fatality count remains disputed in historical records. For over 40 years, the wreck lay undisturbed and largely forgotten until its discovery in 1958 by a Slovenian diver. Today, the Bering Gouge rests upright at a depth of 40 meters off the Croatian coast. Unlike many World War I-era wrecks, the vessel remains remarkably intact. Its hull, boilers, and superstructure are clearly discernible, though some damage from Yugoslav Navy target practice in the 1920s is evident. The wreck has transformed into a thriving artificial reef, with marine organisms colonizing its metal surfaces. Sponges, corals, and algae create a colorful veneer over the once elegant passenger ship. The site has become a premier technical diving destination, offering a well-preserved example of early 20th century naval architecture and a poignant memorial to one of the first civilian maritime tragedies of the Great War. The SS Oria began its life as an unremarkable Norwegian cargo steamer, built in Sunderland, England in 1920. At 2,127 tons and approximately 100 meters long, nothing in its early commercial service suggested its eventual role in one of history's deadliest maritime disasters. The vessel's fate changed dramatically during World War II. After Norway's occupation in 1940, the Oria was interned in Casablanca that June. 1 year later, the ship was requisitioned by French authorities and renamed Saint Julien. By November 1942, it was formally returned to its Norwegian owner and renamed Oria, but was soon after assigned to a German shipping company for Mediterranean operations. By early 1944, Italy's surrender had created a dilemma for German occupation forces in the Dodecanese Islands. Thousands of Italian soldiers, formerly allies, were now considered prisoners of war. On February 11th, German authorities directed approximately 4,000 Italian POWs from Rhodes onto the Oria, a vessel with normal capacity for perhaps a few hundred passengers. Reports indicate the prisoners were confined below decks in cargo holds, packed so densely that movement was impossible. The ship departed under a Norwegian captain, with a final destination of prisoner camps in Germany, stopping first in Greece. On February 12th, the severely overloaded vessel encountered strong winds and heavy seas near Cape Saunion, just 25 miles from Piraeus. Captain Rasmussen lost control in the storm, and the Oria struck rocks near a small island. The impact breached the hull, causing progressive flooding. What followed constitutes one of the war's greatest humanitarian tragedies. With hatches secured from outside, prisoners in the lower holds had no escape route. As the ship broke apart, over the next 36 hours, those trapped inside either drowned or died from exposure in frigid waters. German authorities mounted minimal rescue efforts, delayed by the storm conditions. Of approximately 4,000 people aboard, only 28 survived, 21 Italian prisoners, 6 German guards, and 1 Greek crewman. German censorship ensured the disaster remained unreported, and many Italian families received only vague notifications that their loved ones were missing. The Oria's wreck remained officially undocumented until 1999, when a Greek diver located it after interviewing local fishermen, who had recovered artifacts in their nets. The vessel lies at depths between 28 and 42 meters, broken into multiple sections, but with significant portions of the hull still recognizable. Unlike many historic wrecks, the Oria has received minimal official protection or memorial recognition. Divers report encountering personal artifacts, mess tins, boots, and other belongings, still scattered across the seabed. With an estimated 4,095 fatalities, the Oria disaster surpasses the Titanic's toll nearly threefold, yet remains mostly absent from popular maritime history, a forgotten catastrophe from the Mediterranean theater of World War II. Launched in 1923 as the Munich, the ship that would later become the General von Steuben, initially served as a prestigious passenger liner for a major German shipping line. At 168 meters long and over 17,000 tons, It was the first German transatlantic vessel to enter New York Harbor after World War I. In 1930, the ship was renamed after Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben, the Prussian officer who aided American forces during their revolution. The outbreak of World War II fundamentally altered the vessel's purpose. By 1939, the German Kriegsmarine commissioned it as an accommodation ship, later converting it to an armed transport. In early 1945, as Soviet forces advanced into eastern Prussia, the ship joined Operation Hannibal, the massive evacuation of German military personnel and civilians from the eastern Baltic. On February 9, 1945, the General von Steuben departed Pillau, severely overcrowded. Military records indicate the ship carried wounded German soldiers, refugees, returning military personnel, medical staff and crew members, an estimated 5,200 people in total. Just after midnight, on February 10, Soviet submarine S-13, commanded by Captain Alexander Marinesko, detected the dimly lit ship. This was the same submarine that had sunk the Wilhelm Gustloff 9 days earlier, with the loss of over 9,000 lives. At 12:55 a.m., Marinesko fired 2 torpedoes at the General von Steuben from a range of approximately 1 kilometer. Both torpedoes struck the ship, one near the bow, another near the engine room. The impacts caused catastrophic flooding and immediate power failure. In darkness and freezing temperatures, the ship listed severely to starboard. Few lifeboats could be deployed in the chaos, and the wounded soldiers in lower decks had virtually no chance of escape. Within 20 minutes, the General von Steuben disappeared beneath the Baltic Sea. The German torpedo boat T-196 managed to rescue approximately 300 survivors. The remaining 3,900 passengers and crew were lost, making it one of the deadliest maritime disasters of World War II. The wreck's location remained unknown until May 2004, when a Polish vessel discovered it approximately 30 kilometers off the coast of Poland. Lying on its port side, at a depth of 70 meters, the wreck is well preserved in the cold, low-salinity Baltic environment. Marine growth is minimal compared to wrecks in warmer waters, leaving much of the original structure intact. The hull reaches up to 50 meters from the seabed, with torpedo damage visible on the port side. Technical divers occasionally visit the site, though the depth, temperature, and poor visibility make it challenging. As a war grave containing thousands of casualties, the wreck is protected under international law, emphasizing observation rather than artifact recovery. The F.W. Abrams exemplified the hard-working tankers that fueled America's growing industrial economy. Built in 1920 and measuring 140 meters in length, this Standard Oil vessel spent decades transporting petroleum products along well-established shipping lanes without incident. The attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 thrust the F.W. Abrams into a dramatically altered operational environment. By early 1942, Germany had initiated Operation Drumbeat, bringing submarine warfare directly to American coastal waters. The region off North Carolina became particularly dangerous, with dozens of merchant vessels torpedoed within sight of shore. To counter this threat, the U.S. Navy established defensive minefields near key ports and shipping channels. These underwater barriers were designed to provide safe transit zones for vessels and to deter enemy encounters. It was precisely this protective measure that would claim the F.W. Abrams. On June 2, 1942, the tanker departed Aruba, carrying 90,000 barrels of crude oil, bound for New York. After an uneventful voyage north, it approached the Outer Banks on June 10. Following standard wartime procedure, the vessel anchored overnight near Ocracoke, awaiting daylight escort through the hazardous waters around Diamond Shoals. In the early morning hours of June 11th, a Coast Guard patrol craft arrived to guide the tanker safely through the defensive minefield. As dawn broke, heavy rain severely limited visibility. The F.W. Abrams lost visual contact with its escort, and in the confusion, the captain altered course, inadvertently steering directly into the minefield. At 6:40 a.m., an explosion tore through the starboard bow as the ship triggered a mine. 30 minutes later, a second detonation occurred near the midship pump room. The crew, believing they were under attack, prepared to abandon ship. A third explosion at 7:40 a.m. sealed the tanker's fate, and the captain ordered evacuation. All 36 crew members reached shore safely at Ocracoke Naval Station by 12:40 p.m. The abandoned F.W. Abrams drifted northward, gradually settling on its bow. Naval officers who inspected the vessel on June 14 found it completely submerged and unsalvageable. The wreck's exposed mast created a navigation hazard, occasionally misidentified as submarine periscopes. Navy salvage operations later depth-charged and wire-dragged the wreck to flatten it below a safe clearance depth. Today, the F.W. Abrams rests in approximately 80 feet of water, 10 miles south of Hatteras Inlet. The wreck is broken into 3 main sections, with the stern section remaining most intact. The bow section, while recognizable, shows significant damage from post-war demolition efforts. Marine life has transformed this accidental casualty into a thriving ecosystem. Divers regularly encounter rays, grouper, octopus, and occasionally dolphins around the wreck. The F.W. Abrams is a reminder of the complex dangers merchant mariners faced during wartime, where friendly measures designed for protection could themselves become deadly hazards. Every ship has a story. From the towering icons of maritime innovation to the ghostly remains forgotten by time. These ships tell tales of war, storms, and mystery. In this video, we'll explore 10 ships that were captured in both their prime and in their tragic afterlives, beneath the waves or abandoned ashore. Let's dive into what remains of these ships after their fateful journeys. The ocean remembers everything, every ship that has sailed upon its surface, every soul that has been claimed by its depths. But what we choose to remember, what stories we tell ourselves about these losses, reveals as much about us as it does about history itself. In this video, we'll explore 5 military ships whose final moments remain mysteries for decades. These weren't random tragedies. They were moments when technological confidence met operational reality, when engineering marvels were destroyed in minutes. Warships that now lie scattered on the ocean floor, their stories lost with the men who sailed them. For years, families wondered, naval experts theorized, but only when deep-sea exploration finally reached these wrecks could the truth come to light. The HMS Hood entered service in 1920 as the largest warship in the world. At 860 feet long and weighing almost 45,000 tons, she represented everything the Royal Navy stood for after World War I. Her 15-inch guns could hit targets 17 miles away, and her 31-knot top speed made her faster than any battleship afloat. For 20 years, the HMS Hood sailed the world from Australia to the Caribbean, cementing Britain's naval dominance in the public mind. By May 1941, the Hood was no longer the most modern ship in the fleet, but she remained its most famous. When German codebreakers revealed that the battleship Bismarck and heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen were heading for the Atlantic shipping lanes, the HMS Hood and the new battleship HMS Prince of Wales were sent to intercept them in the Denmark Strait. The engagement opened at 5:50 a.m. on May 24, 1941. Both British ships targeted Bismarck, while the German ships concentrated their fire on the Hood. At a range of 13 miles, the massive naval rifles hurled shells weighing over a ton at the opposing ships. For 8 minutes, the outcome remained uncertain. At 6 a.m., Bismarck's fifth salvo changed everything. A 15-inch shell penetrated the Hood's deck armor and detonated her aft ammunition magazines. The explosion broke the ship in half and killed 1,400 men in seconds. The Hood disappeared beneath the waves so quickly that nearby ships initially thought she had simply vanished in a smoke cloud. Only 3 survivors were pulled from the water. For 60 years, the Hood's final resting place remained a mystery, lying somewhere beneath the Denmark Strait's frigid waters. When marine archaeologists finally located the wreck in 2001, the discovery revealed the true violence of that morning in 1941. The Hood lies scattered across the ocean floor in 3 main sections, separated by a huge debris field. Her bow section rests on her port side, a ghostly monument to British naval engineering. Between the bow, stern, and conning tower, the debris field contains twisted metal, gun barrels, and fragments of what was once the world's mightiest warship. The central section, where the magazines exploded, simply no longer exists as recognizable ship structure. The stern section rises from the ocean floor at a steep angle, its rudder still locked in the port turn the Hood was making when she sank. Even in death, the Hood tells the story of that catastrophic explosion, her scattered remains proving that no amount of pride or tradition could protect her crew from the brutal impact of high-explosive shells and ammunition magazines. In the early days of aircraft carrier warfare, no ship embodied the promise and uncertainty of naval aviation like USS Lexington. Commissioned in 1928, she was born from the Washington Naval Treaty's limitations on battleship construction. Transformed from a planned battlecruiser into one of America's first true aircraft carriers, her massive size and distinctive 8-inch gun turrets made her unique among carriers, a floating experiment in how wars might be fought from the sea. The crew called her Lady Lex with genuine affection. She was home to nearly 3,000 officers and enlisted men who pioneered carrier operations. Throughout the 1930s, when Pearl Harbor thrust America into war, Lexington was already at sea, ferrying Marine fighters to Midway Island. By May 1942, Lexington found herself in the Coral Sea, part of Task Force 17, racing to intercept Japanese forces advancing toward Australia. The Battle of the Coral Sea would be the first, where opposing fleets never came within sight of each other, fighting instead through their aircraft across hundreds of miles of ocean. On May 8th, Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes found their mark. 2 torpedoes struck Lexington's port side while bombs set fires throughout her forward sections. Initially, the damage seemed manageable, then the gasoline vapors ignited. Shortly before 3 p.m., a massive explosion ripped through the ship's interior. More explosions followed as torpedo warheads cooked off in the intense heat. By 5:07 p.m., Captain Frederick Sherman ordered abandon ship. The destroyer USS Phelps delivered the final blow, firing 5 torpedoes to prevent Lady Lex from falling into Japanese hands. 216 of the Lexington's crewmen went down with the ship, while 2,700 survived to fight another day. For 76 years, Lady Lex remained hidden beneath the Coral Sea, until Paul Allen's research team made an extraordinary discovery in March 2018. Resting 10,000 feet below the surface, Lexington defied every expectation about deep ocean preservation. The main section of the wreck sits upright, her superstructure standing proud against the Pacific darkness. Most incredibly, aircraft remain exactly where they were abandoned during the evacuation. Devastator torpedo bombers sit in the hangar bay, their wings folded. Fuel gauges still readable after decades in the abyss. Throughout the ship's compartments and superstructure, even delicate details, like radar equipment and gun mounts, survive in pristine condition. The cold, oxygen-poor water has turned Lady Lex into a time capsule, preserving not just a ship but a moment in naval aviation history, when carriers were still experimental weapons, and their crews were writing the rules of a new kind of warfare. USS Grunion was built for war. Commissioned in April 1942 as one of America's new Gato-class submarines, she represented the cutting edge of undersea warfare technology. At 312 feet long with 10 torpedo tubes and a crew of 70, Grunion could dive to 300 feet and patrol for weeks without surfacing. Her electric motors ran silent beneath the waves while her diesel engines could push her at 20 knots on the surface. By June 1942, Japanese forces had achieved what no foreign power had managed since 1812. They occupied American soil. The islands of Attu and Kiska in Alaska's Aleutian chain now flew the rising sun flag. The Grunion received orders to patrol these hostile waters, hunting Japanese supply ships and gathering intelligence on enemy positions around Kiska. The submarine's war began successfully. On July 15th, she intercepted 2 Japanese submarine chasers, sinking both vessels in quick succession. Her crew had proven themselves capable, and the Grunion's radio reports to Dutch Harbor reflected confidence and professionalism. For nearly a month, she operated in the dangerous waters north of Kiska, dodging enemy patrols while completing her mission. July 30, 1942, brought Grunion's final message. She reported heavy anti-submarine activity around Kiska, and confirmed 10 torpedoes remaining in her tubes. Then the radio went silent. Search aircraft found no trace of the submarine. By October 5th, USS Grunion was declared overdue and presumed lost with all 70 hands. The mystery persisted for over 6 decades until an unexpected breakthrough emerged from Japan. In 2002, a naval historian contacted American researchers with a wartime account from the freighter Konomaru. The Japanese ship's commander described an encounter with an American submarine near Kiska around the time the Grunion disappeared. His report included precise coordinates and details that had never appeared in official records. The discovery came in August 2007, when underwater cameras finally located Grunion's broken hull, 3,300 feet beneath the Bering Sea. The wreck told a story of mechanical failure and tragic irony. Evidence suggests that 3 of Grunion's own torpedoes malfunctioned during an attack on Konomaru, bouncing off the target without exploding. A 4th torpedo circled back and struck the submarine, damaging her diving planes and sending her into an uncontrolled descent past her crush depth. The Grunion had become a victim of the very weapons meant to protect her, lost to the same torpedo problems that plagued the entire American submarine force in 1942. The discovery finally answered questions that had haunted families for generations, while revealing how quickly the hunter could become the hunted. in the unforgiving waters of the North Pacific. In February 1945, as the Third Reich collapsed around them, German submarine U-864 carried one of the war's most desperate missions. Operation Caesar called for the long-range sub to transport advanced technology to Japan, including mercury for explosive production, jet engine components, and rocket guidance systems. If successful, these technologies might extend Japanese resistance long enough for Germany to reach a diplomatic solution. The U-864 was built for exactly this kind of extended mission. Her long-range design could carry cargo across entire oceans, and her experienced crew understood the risks of operating in enemy-controlled waters. All 73 crew members understood the stakes. Their cargo could change the war's course in the Pacific. The mission began badly. Mechanical problems delayed U-864's departure from Germany, forcing repairs in Bergen, Norway. When U-864 finally sailed on February 6, 1945, her engines were already suspect. Unknown to Captain Wolfram, British codebreakers had intercepted German communications about Operation Caesar. The HMS Venture was dispatched to intercept the cargo submarine. On February 9, U-864's diesel engines began misfiring, producing the loud, irregular noise that submarine crews feared above all else. The HMS Venture's hydrophone operator detected the telltale sound. For 3 hours, the two submarines played a deadly game of hide-and-seek beneath the North Sea. Lieutenant of the HMS Venture faced an unprecedented challenge. Working with his crew, he computed a firing solution in 4 dimensions: time, distance, bearing, and depth. At 12:12 p.m., he fired 4 torpedoes at 17-second intervals. U-864 heard the torpedoes coming and tried to evade, but the 4th weapon found its mark. The explosion broke U-864 in half, sending her to the seafloor with all hands. Operation Caesar died with her crew that day. The engagement remains unique in naval history. It's the only documented case of one submarine sinking another while both were submerged. But U-864's story didn't end with her sinking. When Norwegian fishermen discovered the wreck in 2003, lying in 2 sections 150 meters below the North Sea, they uncovered an environmental disaster in progress. The 65 tons of mercury U-864 carried to Japan remains locked within her hull, slowly leaking into the surrounding water. Steel containers holding the toxic metal are failing after decades on the ocean floor, contaminating marine life and forcing the Norwegian government to ban fishing in the area. The mercury poses such a severe threat that authorities plan to entomb the entire wreck under sand, gravel, and concrete, turning U-864 into an underwater sarcophagus. Even in death, the submarine continues to threaten the living, her deadly cargo a lasting reminder of how desperately Germany fought to change the war's outcome. Very few places seemed safer in October 1939 than the Royal Navy's primary base in the Orkney Islands. The vast natural harbor, known as Scapa Flow, had sheltered Britain's entire fleet during World War I. Minefields, steel barriers, and sunken ships blocking the entrances made a submarine attack theoretically impossible. HMS Royal Oak, a veteran battleship that had fought at Jutland in 1916, lay at anchor there on the night of October 13, 1939. Her crew secure in the knowledge that they rested in Britain's most protected anchorage. Royal Oak was no longer the Royal Navy's most modern battleship. At 23 years old, she was too slow to keep up with the fleet, relegated to harbor defense duties, where her anti-aircraft guns could protect Scapa Flow from air attack. Her crew of 1,200 men took pride in their vessel's distinguished service record and the safety of their home base. That safety was unfortunately an illusion. A skilled German submarine commander and captain of the U-47 had studied reconnaissance photographs of Scapa Flow's defenses, identifying weaknesses in the eastern approach through Kirk Sound. Under cover of darkness, U-47 slipped between the block ships, navigating treacherous currents to reach the anchorage's heart. At 12:58 a.m. on October 14th, U-47 fired its first torpedoes at Royal Oak. The explosion was so minor that many aboard thought it was an internal accident. Captain Preen used their confusion to reload and attack again. The second salvo, at 1:16 a.m. found its mark with devastating effect. 3 torpedoes struck Royal Oak amidships, detonating her magazines. The ship rolled to starboard and sank in just 13 minutes. Over 800 men were lost that night. Today, the HMS Royal Oak serves as both a war grave and an underwater monument in the shallow waters of Scapa Flow. The ship lies at a steep angle, nearly inverted, with her port side partially accessible and her massive gun turrets scattered across the seabed, as a reminder of that October night. In clear conditions, the whole of the Royal Oak can be seen from the surface. Unlike deep ocean wrecks, the Royal Oak remains accessible to divers, though strict regulations protect her as an official war grave. Each year, divers conduct memorial services at the wreck, hanging the official flag of the British Royal Navy at the wreck site. The shallow depth means Royal Oak continues to deteriorate, her steel slowly returning to the sea. But her story lives on in the annual ceremonies, and the oil that still occasionally seeps from her bunkers, a ghostly reminder of her tragic end, in what was supposed to be the safest harbor in Britain. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share, and let us know in the comments what shipwrecks you want us to cover next. Don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and until next time, keep exploring.